is a conversation that has been ongoing for a couple of years, and we're just hoping to get some solutions today. We have an array of guests with us today. We have different guests. We have Charles Waria, who is here with us as an external lead for the Kenya Catalytic Jobs Fund, just to help us understand issues of job securing, the issue of unemployment, of course. And we also have Bernice Mburu, popularly known on social media there as a public policy and youth development advocate, who will be with us as well. And of course, we also have Alphonse Were, who is a labor expert, all of this. And of course, also we have Exen Iraki, who is an economic analyst with us today, just to help us understand all these issues that pertain to unemployment in Kenya. Of course, we also have Mutemi Wakiama, who is very known rather in Kenya as one of those people who have been vocal about issues of human rights, and currently he is many things, but among them a team leader for This Is Africa. Again, today's conversation is definitely about unemployment in Africa. Of course, if I can just say something before we just get into the conversation, Africa's population is definitely seen to be growing faster than jobs created in the continent. And whether the trend continues or can be reversed, that is what we're looking at today. And we're hoping to have that conversation today. And with our topic being the growing unemployment challenge in Africa, is it a ticking time? And I want to just throw that question first and foremost. Even before I go too far, let me also introduce my co-host, Maria Sarungi, who is with us. I'm so happy to see you with me today. Maria, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Leah, and I'm really looking forward to this great conversation. As we know, the whole issue around the growing unemployment is an African issue. Every state, one way or another, is grappling with that. So this is going to be a really great conversation. So let's do this, Leah.
Thank you so much, Maria. I see all my guests are here. I believe so. I think, save for one person who I'm not seeing. I know, Charles, you're here with us. We also can see you there. Boku, I'm seeing Iraqi. I'm also seeing Mutami. And I know one of us is also going to be joining us soon. But let me just kick off the conversation. And I want to throw it to you, Mutami. Um, do you think African economies are able to create enough jobs as it is at this moment?
Leah, I think Mutemi has not accepted the invite to speak, so I will just ask him to tap his mic, which is down below on the left. If you can just tap that, that would be great. The invite is already there, so don't hesitate, just tap it and you'll be in as speaker.
Okay, I think I'll throw that question to Mbuku, who is with us as we wait for Mutemi to pick up. Mbuku, the situation in the continent, unemployment, a growing issue. Would you say African economies have the ability to even create jobs at this moment?
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The sound is not coming out very well. Maybe it's the headphones. Yeah, the sound is very distorted. Actually, it sounds almost like you're speaking from very far. Maybe if you try to use some headphones, or if you put the mic of the phone closer, it will have less echo and we'll hear you more clearly.
Is it better now?
Oh,
Yes,
wonderful,
it's
wonderful!
better.
This is great.
Okay, my apologies. I was trying to use the headphones to kill the noise around me, but if you can hear me, the better. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and good evening, everyone. I would like to respond to your question in terms of the economics in Africa being able to deal with the issues of youth unemployment, and also just looking at how much is Africa being the fastest growing continent in the world, and is Africa African economy is ready for that growth, and also are we ready also for the growing population that we have for young people? So I think those are the pertinent questions that we need to ask ourselves this evening, to be able to look at, are we par in terms of policies? I'll just give an experience. In the recent past, I've been working in the creative economy, or rather in the creative sector, and you will find that we don't have we are told don't have policies to be able to facilitate the creative economy, and you will find that the creative space is still evolving. We still haven't catch up with it. We don't know how to tap into it, and you'll find that there's a lot of copyright, a lot of there's no support for the industry. So you'll find that the African economies still haven't been able to look at what are the emerging economies to be able to tap for these young people to be able to tap into. And that's why you'll find that even the young people who are trying to do some of this, some of this work, they're not able to be incorporated in the system in a way that they can be able to benefit from resources or from the national cake, for that matter. So you'll find that there are a lot of gaps in terms of policy. But also, it's just to say that, for example, you'll talk about the emerging economic, like the digital economy. You'll find that most young people are in the digital space as well. And there was a lot of discussion, and especially in Kenya, for example, where we were having, why are we taxing the digital marketplace when it's just forming? And that is where you'll find that, young people have gone through the education system, the curriculum. The curriculum is not very well prepared in a way that they can be able to absorb these young people, because we have about 700,000 young people, graduating from both the tertiary institutions and the universities, but the market is not able to accommodate that. That means that these young people will have to be able to create an opportunity for themselves, and the digital marketplace has been that place. But then, as soon as the young people have been able to access that space, then all of a sudden, then we have a policy in the financial bill 2021, introducing the tax on the digital marketplace. And you'll find that already there are there are already hindrances for young people, for someone who's just forming their business online. In another perspective, I would say that, these young people have not had also enough support, enough resources going to support the MSMEs. You'll find still that the loans are still very high, and the funds that probably we have, for example, in Kenya we have the Youth Development Fund. Still, the young people still can't be able to access because of the issues of security that young people still don't have. So you'll find that we are still growing. There are still not enough frameworks to be able to support these young people who are still coming in for businesses. And the reality is, we only have a very small percentage. We look at, for example, the public service. Being almost the largest employer, it's no longer employing, and by that fact, we only have only 2% of young people in the managerial roles, and even less than 15% of young people in public service. So you will find that young people can only be able to create opportunities for themselves, but then our economies don't have policies and frameworks to be able to facilitate this. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbuku, for those wonderful comments. Iraqi, I do know that the percentage of unemployment in Africa has been on an upward trend. Maybe you can just help us, get a picture of what it looks like in Africa as far as unemployment is concerned, Iraqi.
Good evening. I think the issue of unemployment is not unique to Africa. It is a global phenomenon. Whether you go to Indonesia, whether you go to India or other parts of the world, you find unemployment is a big problem. And it always affects youth more than the others for a simple reason. They don't have the skills, they don't have the experience. So the job market is not ready for them. But I think when we look at this issue of youth of unemployment, we need to be more realistic, because you can look at it from the supply side, and you can look at it from the demand side. When our youth go looking for jobs, they always forget that we don't employ human beings. We don't employ Kamau. We don't employ Onyango. We employ the skills. So once you go to the market without appropriate skills, then you find it very hard to get a job. And it so happens that in Africa, we don't always give our youth the best skills. It is public knowledge in Kenya, for example, that 75% of the university graduates are in social sciences. But most of the jobs are created in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So when you get people who are going to the market that is not ready for them, unemployment results. The problem is, it's very hard to convince the youth that the future is in science and technology. And you just need to go further and look at India or China or South Korea and see the number of graduates who go to science or STEM. And they find jobs not just in their countries but worldwide. So, one way to confront the problem of unemployment in Africa is to change the skills, the knowledge that we give to the youngsters. If we don't change those skills, they will keep on complaining there are no jobs, but there are plenty of jobs, only that they don't have the right skills. That's enough for now.
Thank you, Iraqi. Mutami, you're back. And I know you've been very vocal as far as Kenya is concerned, and we've seen you on the streets advocating for human rights. We've seen you very vocal against the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta. You had a court case because of your vocalness, just talking about the injustices and the heavy burden that is Kenyans are facing right now in terms of taxes, and of course, not to forget unemployment. Mutemi, what's the experience like in Kenya as far as unemployment is concerned?
Thank you very much, Leah. Thank you to you and Mwanzo TV for this opportunity. And I'd like to also thank my fellow speakers, especially it's good to be on the same platform with Banis. I'd like to agree with Mr. Iraqi, not fully. I'd like to agree with him that part of the problem we have is youth not having the right skills. But I'd like to disagree with him that the youth should be blamed for not having the right skills, that they are refusing to take STEM. That's where leadership comes in. So if you have a policy within government to educate young people to have certain skills, the youth will have no say, especially if you're coming in through primary schools and the public primary schools and secondary schools. You will learn what is on that policy, what the policy says you should learn. And you give an example of India and China. It is the governments of India and China, the leadership of India and China and Korea that have identified those skill sets and ensured that the youth have those skill sets. So instead of blaming the young people who have no idea, and that's another thing I'm agreeing with him. Most of them don't even know what the market needs. So that blame should squarely go to the government of Kenya that has been running down the education system for the last 3 decades, producing people for the industrial revolution, 1800s, clerks and managers and supervisors, training all of us to be clerks and machine operators and whatever, in a country where the world factory is China. So we're doing very little industrial work. We're doing very little supervisory and clerical work. But that's what our schools are producing. Who should be blamed? It's a government. But I also want to kind of redirect this conversation from unemployment to income generation. Because a big various statistics show that over 90% of Kenyans who are in employment in what is called, whether they are fully employed or underemployed, they're in what is called the informal sector. So informal sector meaning that they're not formal jobs. And that is an oxymoron. If 90% of Kenyans are in informal employment, then what is formal employment? Shouldn't that the work the 90% are doing, then be the formal employment? Because if we change that attitude and that perception, because if our people are generating incomes doing jobs that are considered informal or odd jobs, Then if we change our framing and mentality, then the government would invest to ensure that there's infrastructure to ensure those people generate enough income to either even create more jobs or to be able to save and start other ventures. But now because we only see office work or working for a bank or getting employed as what is called formal, then our government does not invest. And you realize that most of the taxes that are paid, formal taxes are paid for, their pay and all, are paid by those people who are formally employed. And that is a very small number of people in this country. So I think what we need to do is change the framing, and these policies are there; they've been proposed, and it's just that there's a resistance to changing the structure of the economy. And what is the structure of our economy? I'll go straight into a bit of history. Our country, Kenya, was formed by Imperial British East African Company to extract resources and take them to England. And so the infrastructure that was created, including the administration, the colonial administration, was to enforce that extraction. Planting coffee, tea, maize, wheat, and then getting cheap labor because slavery had been abolished. So you create what is called wage slavery, wage employment. You create jobs with very low salaries so that you can maximize on profits for the colonialists. And when you got independence, the same continued, only that the white people left and then the black people took over that exploitation. So you have an economy that is structured not to pay people good salaries, the so-called formal employed people, because a house girl would be considered a formally employed person, and the minimum wage in Kenya, I think, is around 12,000 shillings now. What can you do with 12,000 in this economy? So we have that same mentality continuing, whereby you're extracting from the people, you're extracting labor cheaply, you're extracting resources and taking them elsewhere. Nowadays, it's a USA, China, the AIDS, all these things that I protest about, IMF and World Bank. They're just other ways of extracting, just clever ways of extracting resources so that they maximize on their profit. That's why you see the World Bank giving us loans that are stolen, and then the sister arm of the World Bank comes to tell us they're coming to stabilize the economy. Yet the World Bank keeps giving us more loans. So we need to understand the structure of this economy and who it's supposed to benefit. And definitely it's not supposed to benefit our young people. It's supposed to keep our young people in perpetual slavery so that they can continue feeding the West and now China and other entities that work in cahoots with our leadership. Let me leave it there for now.
Thank you, Mutemi. One thing I do note from what you've said, Mutemi, is it feels like you're saying it's not that there are no jobs, but the kind of jobs that are there. Alphonse, I know you've been in the labor sector. I mean, you've been a labor expert rather for a long time. And I would like to just ask you this question. Then, is it an issue of decent employment or unemployment?
Oh, thank you, Leah and the Mwanzo TV fraternity for making me join this conversation today. I think there's a lot that we need to really discuss. First of all, unemployment is looking at a relationship we call employment relationship, which primarily looks into the employer and employee. The world has since shifted so that we are no longer looking at that anymore. We're looking at labor, so that when somebody provides work in the labor process, they may not necessarily be employees. But the issue of unemployment being a challenge in Africa, I think I will first just look at it generally, because I know I might be back to speak again. So let's start by saying the youth. Youth simply in my country, Kenya, it means people between age 18 and 35. This is the age when you get to be formally recognized as an adult from 18 years. So ideally, you are starting off life. So the issue of skills that some of my colleagues have raised is when you are starting to have it. So you can demand for you a skills of a 60-year-old who has worked for 25 years when is your first year in employment or in that industry. So I think we need to be very considerate on that. Unemployment by itself also was a major reasonable issue when we were having formalities where we know that you'll be employed, you will retire and such. Today, we are interested in income. Are you able to have sustainable income? Are you able to sustain yourself with what you're doing? Because most of the jobs today are not necessarily employment, but they're skill-based, or they are piecemeal or fixed-term type of contracts and work. So back to the main issue that maybe your question raises. Any work you do should be remunerated fairly. Fairly means it should consider sustainability. Whoever is giving you the work should be able to sustain themselves after paying you as part of the costs they are going to pay. But also you who is earning that living or that pay should be able to sustain your living out of the pay. So we're supposed to have what we call pay of the value of the work being done. That's why there's a principle called equal pay for work of equal value. So do we actually have valuation of the work being done so that we are paying the work, not the age, not the skin color, not the gender, yeah, and not specifically the country. The last thing I just want to raise, I'm just bringing random ideas here. The last thing I want to say here is the issue of, there's something we call purchasing power parity. If you are earning $5 in Kenya today, and somebody is earning $5 in the US, and somebody is earning $5 in China, and somebody is earning $5 in India, will these $5 in each of these geographies do the same value, same type of maybe purchases, or in one place $5 is so small that it can't do much? Yeah, and that's where we come in, so that if I am buying a bottle of 500 milliliters of Coca-Cola, how much does it cost in the UK, in London? How much does it cost in Nairobi, Kenya? How much does it cost so that we are looking at, is the value of money the same, or what can this money being earned from this work do? And you will find that Africa, to be honest, is extremely underpaid, is exploited, to say the very least. So that the army of labor that we are having among the young people, it's an artificial creation so that we are able to continue gaining cheap labor from them. And that it's a complex circle. It's a complex circle. So the decency of labor is not there. I don't think that we should be discussing whether people should be employed or not. What we should be discussing is whether people should be paid well so that they can sustain themselves. Because if you're a consultant, if you have a skill and you consult, you not work daily. But if you work, let's say for 2 months, that 2 months maybe should be in a position to sustain your minimum subsistence for that year. If your total working hours is 2 months for that, so that we are not saying that you'll be consulting every day, because it's not practical. If you are then formally employed, then we must also be asking which sectors, because the formal employment can only be sustainable in what we call a real economy. And real economy in our continent, Africa, will come from either agriculture or manufacturing. So what are we doing to ensure that these sectors not only are having extractive values, but also we're having value addition, so that we have a higher value being derived from them? So that if you don't have value addition, so that you have coffee from the farm and you're only paying for the extraction value, then when you want to add value to the coffee, you take it as an export, so that the country that's now getting that and importing it is the one that's adding value, and then the value goes up and they get the higher earnings. Then I think what we need is to change that type of value chain, so that the higher value should be at the very source, or closer to the very source, value addition to those two industries, that is manufacturing and agriculture. So can I say this is my last one, but then I give somebody else a chance?
Go ahead.
Yeah. The median age of an African youth today, it's around 20 years. So that as we are talking of the Africa as a continent, it has a median age. This means not even say the youth, but the age of an African on average is 20 years. Yeah, and that makes it the youngest by population, or by age by age. Now, if on paper we check on what is recorded, you'll also discover that in Africa, the unemployment rate is very low. It's actually around between 10 and 11, around 10.5%. I think that is according to ILO, International Labour Organization, in 2021. Now, when you analyze where these workers are, where these young people work, they work in informal sector where the best they can achieve is actually a meal a day, not even 3 meals a day. So that as much as they are working, the type of work they are having is what we refer to as precarious type of work that is very, very, putting them in a very vulnerable situation, work that cannot be sustained, work that can only perpetuate poverty. So if we are thinking of unemployment, now technically we will be asking ourselves, what is unemployment? Unemployment is not a situation where people are not employed or are not working, but unemployment is where most of the time of these people in the productive age is used in something different from actually production. So they're not earning from it. So we must be thinking of, if people are working in the production process, they must be having what you call gainful remuneration, or if they're employed, we have gainful employment. That means employment that can take care of them and their dependents. On average, again in Kenya, an employee supports 10 people directly and almost 15 people on average indirectly. So that's 25 dependents. Now, if you are earning $200, between $200 and $400 a month, you find that that becomes very difficult to sustain. I'll make that as my introductory, maybe remarks on the same.
Thank you, Alphonse. I want to shift a little bit to Iraqi. Iraqi, I don't know what your thoughts would be regarding what Alphonse is saying, that it's really not an issue of unemployment, but how productive is it for someone to work for a certain number of hours, and is that money they get in return enough for them to take care of their needs and everything? I mean, help us to, also further understand. I mean, Iraqi, do you agree with this?
I agree with my partner to some extent, but let's also be realistic. One of the reasons why we are paid very low salaries and wages in Africa is because of a supply of labor. If you're looking for people to do some work for you, find a lot of people trying to do that, and you can pay them as low as possible. Now, if you go to other countries where population growth is low, you discover there is shortage of labor. And because there's shortage of labor, the salaries go up, the wages go up. I was checking last, I think 2 months ago, about how much it costs to get a haircut in London. It's about $15. Here it is probably $1. So the fact that we have been, and nobody want to say this loudly because it is considered a bit rude, we have been very good in producing wage earners or workers, and that brings down the wages. Number two, one of the reasons why we have a very high level of unemployment in Africa is because we don't love ourselves. It's very easy to create a job, very easy. Just create demand for goods and services, create demand for cars, create demand for food, create demand for anything, and you create jobs. But in Africa, we don't like our own. We don't like our own car. We don't like our own coffee. We don't like our own tea. We don't like anything in Africa. And because we don't consume our products, we don't consume our goods, we don't consume our services, then eventually there is no job that are created. So I remember Trump saying one day that he wants America first, so that if you're producing a good that is made in America, it should be given first priority. Economists can talk until evening talking about competitive advantage, but national interest matter. So if we have to create jobs in Africa, we must start consuming African goods. We must start consuming African services. You create demand, you create jobs. It is that simple. We cannot keep on talking about joblessness in Africa when we are the people destroying jobs. Just think, if you import a V12 or a Mercedes, how many jobs do you export to Germany? Or how many jobs do you export to a place called Japan? But if you told people that there's a new car called Mebius in Kenya, or there's a new car called Nyayo car, and they want to buy it, they'll just start laughing at you. So the starting point is we must see ourselves as a job creators, then we can start blaming the external agents, as somebody put it a few minutes ago.
All right. Interesting thoughts there. Maria, I can see you want to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, I actually just wanted to throw it out there for anyone to pick it up from our prestigious panel, and that is taking it back to what is the colonial legacy. One of the biggest discussions that is being going on, for example, in Tanzania, and I'm sure that it will come eventually to some of the other African countries, has been around the language that is used for the language of instruction in schools. So the peculiarity around Tanzania is that in the primary school is in Swahili, the language of instruction, and then when you get to higher education, meaning secondary school, it's English, all the way up to universities. And that for some of the experts actually is the reason that Tanzanians are not doing very well on the job market. So you'll find that this becomes an issue. How much of the language of instruction, understanding properly skills, does this actually tap into? And this is a debate, I think, that will continue to be a growing issue in Africa because of the fact that English and French are not indigenous per se to our culture. So I think that that's going to be the next level, whereby now we are seeing that even in China and elsewhere, everybody's making an effort to speak English. Yet for Africa, the use of our indigenous languages is something that is of a source of pride, and it could be a reason why we're seeing also the upcoming youth having and struggling more with employment and with quality jobs, which some of you have referred to. So I'm throwing it out there for anyone to pick up.
I can be bold if I'm around.
Yes,
can
yes, please
see
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
All right. I just wanted to speak to some of the issues that have been raised by the earlier speakers around the cost of labor in Africa, the cost of labor in Kenya, the issue of skills, and the aspect of job creation, and how we approach the aspect of job creation. But let me first speak to the issue of the cost of labor. Now, it's a perception that the cost of labor in Africa is low. For example, like Africans are paid low. But when you look at it, you ask yourself, if the cost of labor in Africa is low, why aren't we having the business process, the BPOs, the business process outsourcing coming to Africa? A lot of the business process outsourcing is going to Asia, and especially to China and India. Why? Because the cost of labor in China and India is way cheaper. Today I'm working in a program, but we're trying to change that and figure out how do you bring the cost of labor in Africa, in Kenya, so that we can have companies that are outsourcing for business processes in China and India to come to Africa. They ain't coming to Africa because they're saying Africa is expensive. Now, that's one thing to think about. That if we're going to create jobs in Africa, can we think about the cost of labor and why it is easier for example, Apple to outsource the manufacturing in China and have the phones assembled in China and then sell them in Africa? Africa is seen more as a market destination as opposed to a labor destination. So that's one. Then there is the question of skills, and people keep talking about, we don't have the skills, we don't have the skills, and I keep wondering, why do you say that? Why do you keep saying that Africa doesn't have the skills when Africa does have the skills? In fact, as a matter of fact, the human capital, the capital flight from Africa into the Western countries is humongous. It's humongous. It's a crisis that the labor market is dealing with right now, that Africa's best is moving out of Africa into the developed countries. Why? Because we have a disjoint. We have a disjoint around utilizing what we have to create solutions for our own problems and converting those solutions, into viable economic and commercial ventures. We don't have that. So we quickly fall back into, there's a disjoint between universities, and universities are churning out between 500 to 700,000 graduates every year, and they have no jobs because they're not linked to the job market. And we keep asking ourselves, when the 700,000 students are going through university education, what is going on in their minds? Aren't they thinking, I am in here to solve problems for my society? And therefore, how is this knowledge I'm gaining helping me to solve problems for my society? And how am I going to solve those problems? Now, because they're not doing that, because they're not spending their time and the intellect and energy thinking about solutions for their societies, they come out expecting society to create jobs for them. What a misnomer. And then we have this perpetual problem of unemployment and people looking up to government. And then you wonder, since when were governments meant to create jobs? Governments were never meant to create jobs. The Cambridge phenomenon, back in the UK, the Cambridge phenomenon was the learning institutions and society had a partnership. You learn, you create solutions. You learn, you create solutions. You learn, you create solutions. And society expected that everyone who had access to knowledge, therefore, had the ability to create solutions. It ain't happening in Africa. Because in Africa, you can't tell whether they are having access to knowledge or not. And people in universities, instead of learning and applying themselves, are busy having a good time and cramming for exams and then graduating and coming out and expecting society and their relatives and friends to help them get a job. And you ask yourself, well, how wrong can a society be? And this is so initially when I got this invitation from there, I said, okay, I've been talking about jobs for a long time. I've been talking about with ILO and everybody else, and trying to figure out in the UK government, trying to figure out how can we redefine what we mean by jobs in this part of the world, and how can we not compare jobs in Africa and jobs elsewhere, because we are 200 years behind in defining jobs. We need to think differently on how jobs for us is not sitting in an office, putting on a tie. Jobs for us is creating solutions to our problems. That is jobs. And as much as we're not creating solutions to our problems, we're not going to be sitting. We can't afford to talk about, for example, electric cars and automatic cars. We need they are far away from us. They're 200 years away from us. We need to be thinking, how can we get solutions to our water problems? How can we get solutions to our milk problems? How can we get solutions to our transport problems? How can we get solutions to our everyday problems? And that's where the jobs come in. As we create the solutions, we do things. We create solutions that we sell to our societies to make our lives better. And that's where we create jobs. And it's not in the offices. And that's where Africa's problem is. And this conversation needs to move
Charles,
from
I
people
hear it
thinking.
as though you're saying we need to begin to redefine what jobs are. What do I call a job in my view, and what someone else calls a job? We just maybe need to redefine that. Is that what you're saying?
It's not a question of redefinition. It's a question, it's a total reorientation, not a question of definition. It's a question of reorientation of our entire thinking as a society. When we have a lot of young people. Today we say, oh, the median age is 20 years, or Africa has a youth bulge. and all this thing, but the youth aren't using the opportunity they have to create solutions. The youth have been caught up in a whining society. Oh, we don't have jobs. Someone give us jobs. But you ask about what do you, where you going? What do you mean? Aren't you living in a society where there's problems? Why can't you figure out solution to those problems? And that creates jobs. But they will not think that, because to them, to African youth, it is somebody else's responsibility, not their responsibility. It is somebody else's responsibility to create solutions for societal problems. Now, we need a complete reorientation, and that's where I sit at, and the funds that the Kenya Catalytic Jobs Fund gives out. If we look for companies and young people who are able to think and imagine that Africa's problems will be solved by Africans, and they can devise solutions, and we can put money into those solutions to not just grow them, but to scale them. And those solutions look at disruptions. For example, if somebody sits and thinks, look, we can bring in blockchain into avocado supply chain. Blockchain into avocado supply chain disrupts the entire value chain, from how the farmers pick the avocado, to how the farmers ensure that the avocado is put in a cold chain within 4 hours after plucking, to how the avocado is transported, to how the avocado is packaged and is exported in an entire cold chain at 4 degrees, and it arrives in whatever the market it goes to at 4 degrees, and allows for shelf life for 3 weeks to 1 month to allow for distribution. That is a game changer. But we need the young people plugging into those solutions, and instead of whining, saying, while someone is transporting, I can set up a collection center near the farmers. I can set up a plucking. I can set up this. We want the young people seizing opportunities that are causing disruptions in how we do things, how we produce, how we transport, how we sell, how we package, everything else. Because that's where the jobs are. The jobs are not in the offices. The jobs are in the folding the sleeves and doing the work
Thank you,
in
Charles.
growing Africa.
Thank you, Charles. Very powerful comments there. Again, I want to just open up the conversation and just tell everyone who's with us today. I mean, this is a very important discussion. I love what the speakers have been saying all through since we began. I just want to say that everyone who is here, the discussion is open to you as well. Everyone else can just chip in and give us experiences from your country. What challenges are you going through? Have you been one person who has been tamaking, looking for a job? What's your experience? What are your thoughts about today's topic? I have seen Alphonse there. You wanted to speak. I'd seen there's a gentleman by the name Ismail. He wanted to speak. I hope we'll have him back. He'd come on as a person requesting to speak and just give us comments. But before we come back again to Ismail, and again, I say that everyone else is open to just give us your thoughts and experiences. Alphonse, I did see you raise your hand. You have something to say. I think it's in relation to what Charles has said. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've gotten a passionate presentation from Charles, but I want to say this: parents are the ones who guide their children and give them the leeway to explore, but within a specific guideline framework. Now, young people, they were children before they became young people or the youth. Then later on, they'll become the people who will now be leading the society, as others will join the young or the youth group. Now, we are really putting so much burden on the young people of becoming innovative, creative, who designed the program and the curriculum that they have been using in schools? Definitely not themselves. Who is determining whether what we are paying them is sufficient or not? Definitely not themselves. when we are reading data, even as in this specific talk, I think you quoted African Competitiveness report of 2017. If I'm not wrong, this is a report that majorly sponsored by most likely World Economic Forum. How was the hand of labor in this, or the organized labor or labor organizations, including ILO in this one? Most likely none. So that we are looking at organizations that are pushing this idea, are the organizations that whose interest actually is underpaying people in the name of underpaying labor, so that the labor cost is down. What we need to know that even though labor is a factor of production, it is extremely unique. It's not the same factor or similar factor to the other factors, because it's a human being that we're talking about, it's labor. So that when you're paying labor, we are thinking of how do you sustain labor, both the production of labor and the reproduction of labor. Because when we are now talking today, in 20 years from now, the people who are being born today are the ones who will be actively joining the labor market. So if we are not having policies and programs that safeguard these people and the environment in which we create the space for these people to grow and get healthier as either good thinkers, good problem solvers, then even if we demand that they solve problems at their time of solving problems, we didn't give them the capacity they required at the right time. So I think that's one major issue. We don't have local curriculum that actually develops people. We actually use inherited curricula, most of which is not practical in our situations as African communities or continent. The so-called developed country, why are they outsourcing labor? They are outsourcing labor because they are paying their people well where they come from. So they want to exploit other countries. Apple is not a company, let's say in India, it's not an Indian company, but you find that the people they pay in headquarters, which is in their original country, I think in this case, the US, or even Google, yeah, or even Twitter, where we are working now, you find that when they want the exploited labor, they go to developing economies and they demand to underpay them. But when it is in their own countries, they are paying people fairly well. Now, there's something I talked about, purchasing power parity. That what is the value of the money you are paying? For example, in China, if you pay somebody $500 in China, and you say that the same person is demanding a similar job or similar person of the same caliber or same level is demanding $2,000 instead of $500 per month in Africa or in Kenya in this case. Now, what will $2,000 do for this employee in Kenya? And what will the $500 do for the other employee in China? You find that the $500 in China is doing way better because the environment of work and what the $500 can do is ahead. And that is an environment that is created by both the leadership, whether it's political and business, as well as the other innovative leaders in the space, so that the young people only join in a system that already is conducive for them to thrive. So that is one. The last thing I want to raise on the same note is, if Africa does not have a single currency, so that every country you go, you must do an exchange of the money you are using. And you find that our currencies ideally are only useful in the countries we are in. But the countries we are talking about that are developing, their currencies literally are universal currencies. Then I think the issue of exchange rates also works against African employment industry or sector. So in a nutshell,
yes.
In a nutshell, I want to say that if I attack your question, which is our issue, is it a ticking time bomb when you're looking at growing unemployment challenge in Africa? The answer is yes. Why is it a ticking time bomb? Because we want to force it to work like it is working elsewhere, yet we have refused to invest in research and development of understanding our problems before we create the solutions in Africa.
Leah, allow me.
I'd like to just give one gentleman. Charles, I'll come back to you. Sorry about that. Let me just give Lavani a chance, and I'll come back to you, Charles, just to hear what you'd like to say about the comments from Alphonse.
Yeah. Lavani, I'd also like to say something once he's done.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
thank
I
you,
also want to
thank you,
respond to
everybody.
Charles.
Go ahead, Lavani.
There's a lot of
Okay, thank
responses
you,
to me.
everybody. I think.
What's going on?
Okay, he
Sorry,
can go
Charles.
first. Please go. Let him go first. It's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Charles.
No. Lavani, go. You have your moment, please.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So I think generally when you talk about employment, we are talking about creating opportunities and solving problems. Basically, if you have a solution and that solution gets to employ more people, that's how we create jobs, being productive. But so far, I think, okay, so far, I think, okay, could just, I think I'm being interrupted, someone. All right. So what I'm trying to say here is, as long as our factors of production are not at par with the global competition that's ongoing, then we are going to have a problem, because the global trade is continuously being what is happening in globalization is it is possible for you to produce goods in one different country and ship them entirely to a different country. So countries with better infrastructure, countries with better policies, countries which are good at ease of doing business are always going to attract investment in those countries. And therefore, products that are supposed to be coming to Africa or that are supposed to be manufactured in Africa, we will lose that opportunity. So I think when it comes to the question of creating jobs, it is not a question of youths or young people. It's about policies by our government and our leaders. Because lack of proper policies is always going to endanger us, no matter how much we try. For example, if you can produce a textile product in China and then sell at a cheaper price in Africa, and the production cost in China is always going to be lower because of factors like automation and every other thing that plays into place. I mean, no sound business person is going to invest his business, a textile business in Africa, while the cost of doing business in Africa is high. There is no single sane business person who is coming to Africa, or we even Africans themselves. We're not going to invest into a country that is ridden with politics and corruption. So, and what is facilitating these failing policy and corruption? Basically, I'm seeing interference from external factors, and also our lack of proper policies within our institutions. So capacity building, our educational institutions, our leadership and governance structures must be put into order before we can even think about creating jobs. Because we are in the middle of a fifth industrial revolution. The jobs as we know now are going to change in the few coming years. In 2030, we expect automation, artificial intelligence, robotics to be coming into play. And in order to prepare a fair playing ground, we need to educate our people right now. And our policies need to think 40 years ahead of time, 50 years ahead of time. And we need to put in place proper governance structures, trustworthy governance. As long as we keep having corruption and corrupted leaders in leading our institutions, there is no way we are going to make out of it. So there is no blame to the young people. The young people are willing to learn. I've never seen an industrious people like the people of Africa. Against all odds, against everything that is happening in our continent, we are still having innovation. But our young people, when they have these innovations, they do not have intellectual property protection, they do not have financing, they do not have an opportunity to explore the creativity they have. Even football, for instance, how many countries promote football? Sports, how many countries promote sports? So it has become a problem that is endemic in every African nation, a problem of lack of proper governance structure and proper policies of uplifting and inspiring growth in our own countries. We encourage our people to go abroad. Our universities are labeled as second class. We talk about leading world global institutions, so we encourage our people to go there. So as long as we keep ascribing to a mentality that we cannot do anything ourselves, I think we are going to fail. We need to prepare. The world is changing, and it's changing very fast. I wouldn't say this is a ticking time bomb, but I say it is an opportunity for us as Africa to see through what is happening in our countries, an opportunity to reflect and set proper policies that will enable our continent and people of Africa to take up the opportunities that the world is presenting today, especially in the fifth industrial revolution. We need to stop being users of technology, users of infrastructure made from other countries, and start creating, because we have the resources, we have the capacity, our young people are able, and that's all I can say for this moment, because I believe we have the capacity, but do we have the will? So we need to get our leadership right, our policies right, and then growth will be spurred. Thank you.
Thank you,
Leah,
Lavani.
Leah,
Charles, I know you
Leah,
wanted to say something. Go ahead.
yeah. First of all, let me appreciate Mwalimu Mutemi, good friend of mine. I'm looking forward to hearing his responses. And also Alphonse, good friend of mine. And also, let me also appreciate Lavani and his comments, onto this topic. And in responding to these, Lavani, you have hit the nail on the head. That in global definition of job creation, we go back to our production systems and we say, how competitive is our production systems so that we then can compete with Brazil, South Africa, China, and India? We can't compete because, as you rightly put it, Lavania, it's our governance problems. We're stuck in the middle of a government road that we don't see the cost of production as an impediment to competitiveness. So we don't see how we charge for electricity, how we charge for these kinds of things, how we charge for the cost of data, as an impediment. Our governance system is north when we are in the south. All right, and that's a problem. That's a problem that will be there forever, because the people we put in government, for some strange reason, do not connect our aspirations as a country. They can't connect it. How we want to compete, how we want to create jobs. They are so only focused on what's in it for them. What can I make from this? So people who sit in every state agency in this country only makes decisions on what's in it for me. So if we reduce the cost of fuel, what's in it for me? The cost of fuel determines the cost of everything. The cost of electricity determines how we produce and the final price of the product we produce, and whether we can sell that product, competitively. And then we realize other countries like Brazil, like China, like India, beat us all the time because they figured out cheaper cost of production, cheaper cost of labor, and that brings me to the whole point of, if we as Africa, please, ladies and gentlemen, I want to plead with you, and I want to plead with you honestly. Governments in Africa are not the solution for job creation. So let's move the discussion away from governments and let's build a critical mass of solution providers outside of the government, but who have the ability to move government. As we speak right now, the cost of data, the cost of internet data, is a challenge towards digital solutions. And I'm trying to put together a group and an ecosystem and say, look, How can we? I'm speaking to the office of the president, and I'm speaking to ICT.
Yes, yeah, you can just turn on. Yeah, Leah, are you on?
Yes, someone. I don't know what just happened because
No, it
I don't know if
was.
it's a technical problem.
Yes, it was a technical problem. Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a
I wanted
technical
to say
problem. But
something. Could I speak?
Yeah, sure.
yes, Mutemi, go ahead. Go ahead, Mutemi.
I can't see the hand raising icon
worry.
on my device.
Don't worry.
You can go ahead.
I just realized I was speaking on mute for all that time.
Oh, okay, just go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
No, I was speaking on mute, but because some of the stuff I was going to speak to around Mutemi, good friend of mine, you go ahead and speak, and then I'll speak to the issues you talk about, in Alphonse in Lavana. But please go ahead.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you,
heard you,
Charles.
Charles. You just missed, I think, 5 seconds of your presentation. You went quiet. So, I'd like to thank and echo a lot of what has been said by my fellow speakers. I'd like to one of the speakers talked about corruption, and I'd like to kind of gently correct. It's not corruption, really. I think part of the reason why we've been unable to deal with this issue is we frame it wrongly. And as Charles have been talking about framing and the way paradigm shifting. As I said earlier, this country or the territory called Kenya, East Africa, etc., were created to extract, to remove resources here, to go and make other people rich. Very few people. So labor, which is us, the workers, our forefathers, was just another factor of production, of that production. And the cheaper the labor, the higher the profits. Once you understand that, then you understand what we call corruption. It's not corruption, it's extraction. It's continuation of the same thing the colonialists used to do that is being done now by the people they left in charge. Okay, I think we need to be clear. So the system is working as it should. It's not, there's nothing wrong with Kenya. Kenya is working as it was designed to work. And that is what Charles is pointing towards, that we need to change that paradigm.
Mutemi, you need to tell us more. You need to unpack a lot of these. Yeah, no, please unpack.
Maybe we don't have the time, but let me try.
Yeah, please unpack. Yeah.
Yeah. The system was designed, for example, from the commercialization of the Kenyan economy, the design of the Kenyan economy from around 1902. How do you get the natives into the then modern economy? You have to pass certain laws, create an administration that will implement those laws. For example, there's something called the taxes that were introduced called the poll tax or the breast tax. I just mentioned those two. The poll tax meant this: anybody who had a hut, the traditional African hut, had to pay tax for just having that pole at the center that holds the roof up. So what you do with this is that
was also the hard tax, Pusemi.
Yeah.
So, Charles, so you're forcing. Charles, can you allow Mutemi just to unpack a bit? That would be great. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So you're forcing people who are not used to the then economy, the European economy, the hard tax or the poll tax, to now leave their work, whatever they were doing. You know, the Africans who are there, who are farmers or herdspeople or whatever, to go now into the so-called formal economy to look for cash to pay for that tax. So they'll go and work in the Mzungu farms or in the Mzungu industry, then either driving vehicles or doing whatever. The breast tax, what was it? It was a tax that was charged to men, to any homestead where a man is, for the women in that homestead, whether it's the wife, the daughters, etc., etc. So if you had a wife or two wives and 3 daughters, then those are 5. You multiply that by 2. Those are 10. So you have to pay tax for that. And then this forced you to leave your house and to stop resisting the whatever, because now the law has been passed, to go and look for money so that you can pay that tax. So people are forced into that economy. And then you go to the coffee farm or the tea farm or the maize farm, and you're paid slave labor. You're paid very minimal amounts of money that you cannot save, that cannot help. The same thing you're complaining today about income that cannot sustain you, or you cannot save. You cannot afford to pay school fees for your kids or rent, so that you're kept in perpetual struggle to just sustain yourself. So that's how the economy was designed. And what was it to do? So that the owner of that coffee farm or tea farm or sugarcane farm or whatever makes as much profit as possible, and then repatriates that profit to the UK. Today we talk about illicit financial flows, where we have companies, for example, you have East African breweries, where those who partake alcohol, we know who owns that company. That company is ideally Kenyan, but it's not Kenyan. The shareholding is mostly Diageo. And they have designed tax systems that allow them to charge, to make sure that they don't pay any tax. If you hear Safaricom talking about paying taxes, like they're the highest taxpayers in Kenya, it's not the tax that they pay to government of Kenya from their operations. It's actually the tax they collect from their employees that they remit to the Kenyan government, or the tax they collect from you when you buy airtime. But if you look at the amount of tax that Safaricom pays itself in terms of corporate tax, it's very minimal. It's actually negligible in terms of the kind of turnover they have. So that is the extraction you're talking about. The economy was designed to extract. And so the other way is that what we call now, what we do, whereby you have, for example, the president being from the family of the largest landowners in this country, or you have the deputy president trading with government to getting tenders so that he can supply things, and most of the time supplies air. Or you have the leader of opposition also trading with government and whatever. It's the same system of extracting. So you're using the government to extract by that tender, where you're supplying nothing, or you're building expressways that nobody needs, and you get your 10%, you're still extracting. So what you're calling corruption is just actually perpetuation, designing a system that allows you to do what the Mzungu used to do, because the country was designed for a few. And if you look behind all these ventures, the British are always there. Now it's the Chinese and the Americans are there. And all these are extracting resources. When Japan comes and says, we are giving you aid to build for you this road from Kenyatta Hospital to where? To Junction. It's not free, it's extraction. You're going to pay for that road. Or even if not you, your kids will pay for it, or your grandkids will pay for it. So they design systems. And sorry, let me just wrap up. Somebody talked about how you design systems, because you need to understand what national interest is. We don't have a national interest as Kenyans. That's why we cannot identify skills that we need to pass on to our young people, so that they can benefit. Those skills can benefit them and benefit the nation. That's why when the internet came and young people went and discovered these income generating opportunities all over the world, the government comes to tax, something that it did not facilitate at all. It comes to tax deliberately. So we need to design systems to change our paradigm, because as someone said, one of my hospitals said, Africans work extremely hard every day to make ends meet. So we need to identify what our national interest is as different African countries, and then design policies and systems and laws that allow us to pursue those interests. The Chinese sent their people out there, they got technology, took it back to China, and now 20 years, 30 years later, China is the leading producer of everything. Thank you.
All right. All right. I just want to give a chance to Helden there. I can see a lady by the name Helden. I hope that's her name.
Yes,
Helden, I see you'd like to say something about tonight's conversation.
Also
yes, I
say
would like
something.
to add something.
Let's just allow Helden to go through, and then we'll come back to you, Charles and Professor Iraki.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you for the hosts, Maria and Mwanzo TV, and also the speaker that was there before, Marimu, who was really touching on some very important key points, I think, as somebody who follows the Kenyan politics or the Kenyan scene. For me, I joined the conversation to really look at the topic, the growing unemployment challenge in Africa. And I was just asking myself, what could be some of the solutions I can bring to this table? And a few things that come to mind is first, the skills that we equip our youth with. So let's say I am a South African youth growing up, and I like for the fees that I have to pay, I can only afford certain universities in my country. So my thought process is, why are there no transnational agreements in Africa itself, where some countries, if they have a really high inflation rate, then a student can be allowed to go study. Let's say, so in the example that I was giving as a South African, I can go study in some of the best universities in Uganda. And after that, then get back home and bring those skills back where I'm from. Or maybe from South Africa and go to Egypt or Nigeria or Senegal or whichever it is, because then this will open up that social just exposure that people need to understand, like, okay, well, maybe my skills in technology are not very well catered to in my country of birth, but then look at XYZ country on the African continent where I can take and utilize those technical skills that I learned into that country. So I really think that while we're thinking about policies, we should start looking at how the African youth that are going into schools, because I think it's Marimo who mentioned it, that it's not that the youth are not working hard. It's not that students are not putting in that time to study and to master the information that is taught to them. It's that they're coming out of the schools with those skills, but yet no one is employing them in their countries. So I think something where transnational agreements could happen would allow that maybe a student from South Africa can go learn French in Senegal, and then there you have it. They have two languages where they can utilize on the African continent wherever they want to then move to next. Another thing is, I really think that we have to start valuing the quality of whatever we're getting in our individual countries. And what I mean by that is, I work in immigration. And it really breaks my heart to see that every single young African who is graduating from a well-known school, from whichever country it is, they're seeking to come as visitors to these Western countries to try to find jobs or livelihoods or survival. And my train of thought is, okay, well, this student has enough qualifications to work at a bank in whatever country in Africa. So why are they looking to come work at a bank in Western countries? And then the more and more I look into that, the more and more I realize that the national banks they're choosing to employ CEOs from Sweden and I don't know, XYZ, Norway, and the UK and whatnot, and have them as the CEOs or the bank directors and whatnot, while we have perfectly capable minds who can take over as managers and then work their way up to get to that CEO level. So I don't remember who in the speakers lineup mentioned this, but other countries, other nationalities are doing this, where you see that they're importing or they're immigrating people from their countries. They're giving them a chance to work their way up. So why this is not being done within our individual countries on the African continent is something that we should be asking ourselves, because this could be a chance for young minds to then occupy the positions in 5-year span where they're now the leaders that we're looking up to. And then third, but not least, or at least I'll finish it there, is that all of us sitting here, and as we discuss this ticking time bomb, because it is a ticking time bomb and it's going to be exploding soon before we know it. As we're thinking about solutions, let's not be reactionary. I think we shouldn't be looking at, oh, well, these leaders are not doing this for us, because we all know they're not doing it. At the end of the day, sitting down and saying, well, this is what they're not doing will not be advancing what we want to see being done. So I would say, let's try to be more on the offensive side, where we're saying, okay, this is what we're doing. Let's say we'll use the example of Kenya, where the borrowing is becoming too much. So then we now say, okay, well, if they're borrowing to build this railway, then let's start having our children or the young people study in construction, study in tech, whatever it is that is needed to build a railway, so that they could be the ones that are negotiating these contracts and whatnot. And it's not a table full of Chinese and Lebanese and Indian people that are deciding, okay, yes, this is how this railway will go. So I'm really trying to make a point of, let's try to also be offensive as opposed to defensive or reactionary in whatever is being done to us, because sometimes crying out loud and saying, hey, they're not listening to us, is part of that problem where, yes, they're not listening to us, and they will not listen until we start valuing that our young minds and our efforts on ground is what will at some point be that block that they cannot pass through. How are they going to be telling us, oh, we're going to employ 15 Chinese people to come and negotiate these deals on where the railway will pass, while there is already young people there saying, no, it cannot pass here, it will pass there, because I have the knowledge. I know that the land here will be faced with this and that. So let's start just doing. And at some point, if these leaders don't want to hear, then our action can show them that we are doing regardless of whatever they choose. And I mean, it's just a matter of time until, I hate to say it, but old age will kick in at some point. And Africa being one of the youngest continents on earth in terms of its people, at some point, again, will be that block they cannot bypass, because we will be the 30-year-olds that are now like being chosen to occupy the positions that, I hate to say it, but that the older folk have died and left open. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you,
And
Helden. Thank you, Helden.
Thank
I,
you.
I have a question, and I think I'll throw this to you, Charles. And briefly, I'd just like to hear from you so that we can
Yeah.
also give other people who have joined the conversation to hear from your speakers, and perhaps you can also respond to what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Helden mentions something I've had over throughout the conversation, issues to do with, we need to look at what is available other than relying, like Helden says, on the government, waiting for the government to come and do something, waiting for the government to create jobs. And I think you also said it, Charles. So I think the question for me to you, Charles, and I'd like you to answer it briefly, is
Yeah.
what opportunities are there in Africa for the young people that they can explore? What sectors? What are we looking at?
Oh my God, that's an amazing question. First of all, okay, there is every opportunity for young Africans. You know, this whole debate around the population bulge, and one is because Africans are really reproducing. You know, like an average African household is like 5 kids. So there's lots of us. You know, my mom had 9 kids. So yes, there's many of us. But coming back to the question briefly is, how can we seize the opportunity for the population bulge to create solutions to Africa? And as she rightly puts it, every day you wake up to problems. Today, as we speak, in my program, we're exporting 21 innovations across 5 sectors. And what they're thinking about every day is, how do we solve? So let me give you an example. Someone sees, and they go to toy market, and they see the ladies in toy market, you know, and their struggles is
That
waking up
toy
at
market
4
is
a.m.
the huge second-hand clothes market in Kenya.
Absolutely, that one. And they talk to the lady there, and the ladies there, and they're like, they have to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning to go to Gikomba to buy, get a bail in that stuff. And this person says, but what can I solve for you? Say, if I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. and I just need to wake up at normal time and open my shop at like 7 a.m., That would be heavenly. Guess what? We have a company that does that, a local company that figured out the retailers in toy market and wherever they are in different parts of Nairobi do not have to wake up at 4 a.m. to go to Gikomba and easily to buy their bills, get their bills and all. We can provide an e-commerce platform that solves that. You place your order via us, we get the suppliers in wherever Kikomba and easily we get a product for you. We negotiate for better prices than you would have negotiated for. We deliver the bills to you on your stall. You don't have to move an inch. We deliver them to you. By the time you open at
Charles,
7 a.m., we are there.
even as you give those examples, I think, briefly, what I'd like to hear from you before we go to Lavani, whom I'd like to hear
Yeah,
from because he's been raising his hand. But what I want to hear from you, because
yeah.
I understand based on what I've had you talk about, you've been working with young people who are into innovations. And what I'd like to hear from you, having been working with young people, what are the opportunities existing right now that they can tap into? If we're looking at agriculture or the
Leah,
textile industry, what are we looking at? Because
Leah,
I know there's so
Leah,
many young people who are with us tonight and they're asking, okay, the government is not creating jobs for us. So then
Leah,
what do I
I
look at
want you,
now? Where do I begin?
Leah, I want you to listen to me and listen to me carefully, okay? These examples I'm giving are young people who are in the process. They were in the market. I'll give another example. I went to where? And this company called FarmWorks has 99% young people. They figured something isn't working in the supply chain. Why can't we just get produce to the market efficiently? And then they got into it. They said, we can do something. We can disrupt the supply chain, from how you get farmers to produce quality. Because they figured companies like Zucchini were complaining and saying, local farmers aren't giving us the product we want, the quantity we want, at the right quality we want, So zucchinis have had to import. Young Kenyans went out from zucchini shops and said, we can disrupt our Kenyans supply. The same way Kenyans were. Now, I saw the other day someone posting how Kenyan farmers will now supply KFC with Kenyan grown potatoes. And I was in celebratory mode. I was like, but that is an indication of how the supply chain has been disrupted to create greater efficiency. Because if Kenyan farmers will not be able to supply potatoes to KFC consistently, they won't hack the market. Now, for Kenyan eaters who go to KFC to get their chips from Kenyan farmers, that supply chain has to be consistent, which means someone is ensuring that Kenyan farmers are producing efficiently and supplying efficiently. That's
All
where
right.
jobs are created. That's where jobs are created.
So
And I
basically
want to
what we are saying,
apply
Charles, is there's many opportunities. So it's just a matter of being
so
able
much,
to identify them. I
so
just want to hear
much,
from Lavani.
so much.
I can see it's as though he's still trying to connect. I'll come back to you, Lavani, as soon as you come back on. Iraqi, I see you have your hand on up. I mean, and I know it relates to what Charles was
Yeah.
saying. You can go
Yeah,
ahead.
one thing, Leah, I'm also seeing that we have added the Jobs for Africa Foundation. I would, if Iraqi doesn't mind, can
Fantastic.
we hear first from
Go
from
ahead.
from Jobs for Africa, and then we get back to you, Iraqi. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Frederick Muia. I'm the Secretary General of the Jobs for Africa Foundation. And thank you to Mwanzo TV for hosting this. This is like music to us because we were founded just to address this problem. Because actually, in 2016, when we launched the Jobs for Africa Foundation in Switzerland, where I'm based, was basically to say youth unemployment in Africa, it has actually become a security issue, very similar to what you are saying is a ticking time bomb. And just as an example, every year we have about 20 million or thereabout young people entering the job market, but
Hello,
you only have 3
hello.
million jobs that are created
It's a network.
in the
Yeah,
what we call the formal economy. So you have 17 million that are left to fend for themselves. You know, they go to the informal economy, they go into what you call survival economy, and we've seen, just to take what you picked as an example. I come from Kenya, though I'm based in Switzerland. You've seen young men who are not even Muslims being recruited by Al Shabaab. Why? Because this gives them an opportunity, for them to survive. So the security issue is very important. And first and foremost, we do advocacy work to make sure that governments place this at the top of the policy agenda. Obviously, jobs are not created by degree. And you see, politicians promising jobs. Jobs are created because you sort of create the conditions for demand for labor, for the services, for the skills to be demanded by the labor market, which means that you need to build an ecosystem. Somebody talked about the supply chain. If you take agriculture, for example, you need to build small and medium sized enterprises throughout the supply chain so that they are going to require the services that youth are offering. And without that ecosystem, you're not going to go anywhere. I know that the person who was talking about design, the way the economies in Africa have been designed, this is going to be a very long conversation if you go into that, because Africa missed the opportunity when people like Kwame Nkrumah were advocating for a United States of Africa. That opportunity was missed, and instead, African countries stuck to the colonial entity, and they just replaced the Wazungus with Africans. So that's the system that we have. But how best can we get um, something out of this system? There are efforts such as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that seeks to, integrate Africa so that you can have, what we call regional value chains that are connected to national value chains. That is how you're going to create entities, enterprises that are truly African, that are able to respond to the needs of the young people in the continent, that are going to be able to have the power to negotiate with the investors who come. There's something that we call local content. Somebody talked about the Chinese who are coming to build a road or to build a bridge. The question is, are we able to equip our youth with the necessary skills to be able to have a portion of that job that is going to be done? Because that's the only way you're going to have some money remaining in the country that is going to sort of push other sectors of the economy to work. I give an example of Morocco, which is a country that has invested so much, so that they've become what you call part of the global supply chain when it comes to motor vehicles. They started making spare parts, for some of these big companies such as Toyota. Now they've moved; they're making spare parts, for the big airplane making companies. So you can see the ecosystem has evolved so much in the country, so that when Morocco, for example, exports cars, the money that they are able to bring into the economy is so much that a country like Kenya that is exporting coffee, you cannot compete with them. I mean, what they they gain because of the value addition is so much when you compare it to what countries that are primarily exporting agricultural products are getting. So, to sum up, what I would say is that each country has what we call a competitive advantage. And in order to remove so many people from poverty, such as the way China has been able to do, what you need to do is to identify what your competitive advantage is, because we are in a global economy. So if it is logistics, because like the port of Mombasa, we it's you have the access to the sea, so you can develop logistics. Another town can develop something else, and then you contribute to either the national economy, the African market, and eventually the global market. That is only the way. That's the only way you're going to be able to build an ecosystem where you have specialized enterprises based on the competitive advantage, and then you're going to build training and school system that focuses on providing skills to our youth, so that when they enter the job market, the companies are requiring those skills, and then you're going to move the unemployment agenda forward. Thank you.
Before you go away, I have this question for you, because I know some of our speakers have been talking and saying that it's not an issue of the youth have to wait for employment to be created, that they can actually create that employment. If you were to be speaking to young people today, the young people of Africa, what will be the top five, if I can call them industries or areas they can pursue right now that are perhaps lucrative for Africa, that they can say, hey, I want to get into this sector, I can see opportunity, and I can create employment or just tap into it and get something to do?
Okay. Just maybe I could follow up with what I was saying about the competitive
I,
advantage.
I, I think there's something with your mic. Maybe you can
Oh,
adjust it.
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Just to follow up on what I was saying when it comes to each country, identifying a competitive, an area where it has competitive advantage. I gave the example of Morocco, where they moved into aeroplane in spare parts and motor vehicles and that kind of thing. You have Kenya and Lesotho, for example, where they moved into textiles. Lesotho is a very small country, not it doesn't have a lot of resources, but there is a time it was even competing with countries such as Bangladesh when it comes to textiles. So, unless a country is able to identify which areas where it has that competitive advantage, it's going to be very, very difficult, because you cannot duplicate something where another country is it's better placed. So, but to identify certain sectors, when we launched the Jobs for Africa Foundation, we did identify agriculture. Why? Because Africa, is basically agricultural. So the challenge for youth is that they are not very much interested in agriculture. On average, farmers in Africa, they are aged around 55 years and above. But there we seeing increasingly youth, because you are able to mix agriculture with digital skills. Agri-tech is something that is developing a lot. So there are many opportunities along the supply chain, as I was mentioning. You don't have to be a farmer growing. You can be, an extension officer, an agronomist supporting the farmers. There are a lot of other jobs that are coming up, such as data management. So there are quite a number of areas. So agriculture mixed with digital economy, as we were talking about, mobile telephony has also opened a lot of opportunities for young people. So these are just some examples that I can highlight.
Thank you so much. I see Lairuka is here with us. Lairuka, you can go ahead and talk. Lairuka, are you there?
Yeah, Laiguka, I actually muted your mic. So just unmute it. Touch the mic there on the side. Yeah, I've seen you've switched it on. Yeah, touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, good.
Okay, I'm saying, hello. Are you there?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Yeah, go
Yes,
on.
we're there. We can hear you.
I'm saying I've listened to this conversation, and it's an interesting conversation. But the reality is, in as much as we talk about unemployment, what we can do to stop that unemployment, the issue is, do we really have the kind of leadership that is committed to that? Because even as we say, we don't want to say someone else has to do it for us. The leadership that we have in Africa, which seemingly is connected to the developed countries, who, even though are not colonizing us physically today, are more interested in putting us in that state. Now, the question is, how do we then create the employment for people who are qualified? Because the graduates, for instance, if you look at Kenya, the graduates who are here are qualified, very qualified, because when they leave this country and they go abroad, they are doing a very good job there. And I have never seen a Kenyan who has gone abroad and is complaining. You will hear, in fact, the people there, the employers, they are saying they are doing a good job. But what is this thing that makes it impossible that the same people cannot work here? Then, according to me, we need to look for a way that we will have economic development within Africa. And maybe we should start looking at it from the perspective that maybe China and Russia are doing. That we need to cut ourselves from the so-called Eurocentric view, where we are following what they are doing. They lead and we are following. And we always use like the supply chain that I hear the speakers talking about, that supply chain or what. We need to come up with our own ways, because we have not even been able to exhaust what we have, our own markets. In fact, like we talk about the East African countries, the kind of trade that the first East African countries, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya are doing, is just so small. And in fact, if you follow it, we are actually competing each other in a very bad way. So the question is, how do we get our governments to be committed? Because we are not saying that we want the governments to create employment. The governments need to create a conducive environment. Because without a conducive environment, then there will be no employment. Because after all, who will come, for instance, today? We know what's happening in Kenya today. The taxation regime is just too high. So who is going to come to Kenya to invest in Kenya when you can still produce things from Germany and send them to Kenya, or produce from United States and send them to Kenya at a cheaper price? So to solve this question of unemployment in Africa, we must be able to tackle the question of leadership in Africa. Because as long as we are countries which we don't look at ourselves as Africans, and we look at ourselves as countries, as small countries, and we are too selfish to the extent that people who want to colonize us or use us against each other can easily do it, because we don't care about our neighbors, we care about ourselves. So unless we become sincere with ourselves as Africans, create economic activities that can create growth, because I know, one of the things I know is that these people that are unemployed in Kenya or in Africa are really very much willing to work. But then how do you work where there is no work to do? Because if you don't create an environment where you can attract investors, where investors from within also can invest, then it's just impossible. So we need to tackle this question of leadership, particularly the political leadership. Because the problem that I've seen, particularly I've seen like in Kenya, where people talk about CEOs think they are just another different world from the people who are in the politics. No, the moment we do that, then we fail. Because I remember there's a book a book called A Man of the People by Chinua Achebe, where they were saying when the learned people leave politics, the people who are not learned, then we are in trouble. So according to me, we need to fix politics, because politics, according to me, politics and economics go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Lairuka. Thank you for your comments. Lavani, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to appreciate the fact that you titled this conversation as a unemployment problem in Africa. But I think we need to. I appreciate what the previous speaker has just spoken about. When you talk about politics, there is no politics without economics. So if we get our politics right, our economy will be fixed automatically. I think you can give examples of countries like Singapore. You know, most people talk about Singapore, about the beauty of Singapore right now. But in 1965, Singapore was on the verge of collapse. 80% of the continent of the country was actually living under poverty. And by the rise and strategic thinking of the leadership in Singapore, you can see how the GDP of Singapore has grown to an extent that they do not have the unemployment rates fall almost up to 0 point something percent at the moment. In fact, majority of the people who are working in Singapore are actually coming from outside Singapore because there's an oversupply of jobs in Singapore. I also want to speak about the importance of unity and why we need to speak as Africa. If you look at some of the proponents of Pan-Africanism, the reason why we are calling for unity is because our economies cannot function as the individual countries we are living in. If you are Tanzanian, or if you are Kenyan, or if you're from Chad, your single economy is very small to make any impact when it comes to the global economy. And the reason why I say we need strategic thinking so that we can think in long term and short term. We need to remember that the economy is globalized. And as I mentioned earlier on, you can produce goods from one country far away and ship them all over the world, depending on the conditions that those countries have set for you. So we should not just focus on creating employment, because employment is part and parcel of the economy. And the larger question should be, Africa should move into owning the economy that we live in. Right now, we are attained political freedom. We say we are independent states. We can elect our own leaders. But when these leaders are elected due to factors from outside or within the countries, they are unable to serve the interest of the people. What they are doing actually is they are serving their personal interests or their puppets to Western powers or right now Eastern powers. So they have interest to protect other than the people of Africa interest. And why is it so? Because we are very easily manipulated. We are very easy to target, so they can skew anything to their facts so that it can favor. For example, when you look at the investment in Africa currently, who is driving the investments in Africa? Where's the wealth coming from? You'll find that the majority of this wealth is coming from outside Africa. Foreigners are owning our plants. Foreigners are owning everything we have. So the money they make out of it, like right now we're using Twitter. The more we use Twitter, the more American billionaires become. The more we use Facebook, the more Mark Zuckerberg become richer. So you realize we are not owning these platforms. And by lack of ownership, we are exposing ourselves to be used as tools of production. But at the end of the day, profits do not belong to our countries or do not reside in our countries. When a Chinese company is given a contract to construct highways and infrastructure, mega infrastructure projects in our nation, in our continent, eventually they're taking that money back to China. And we are going back to China to ask for loans. So we are giving them the money plus interest. If that money remained within our country, within our nations, within Africa, we would have been able to create more job opportunities and economic opportunities for our people. That's why we need to empower ourselves. We need to empower our people. Our young people need to be told that we need to move far from being users of the world technologies and actually start owning, especially when it comes to Africa. For example, let's say Africa is united as a single country, by whichever way, whether it's a federal state or it is a single, whichever leadership style we choose. And we make it mandatory that everybody actually produce goods in Africa, like say DR Congo. If you are mining minerals in DR Congo, we ask you that those minerals actually be processed and actually the final product be shipped from Congo. I mean, it will be a game changer. So we need to look within and empower our people. How do we empower our people? We need to identify our areas of weakness. Okay, let me just sum it up. We need to identify our areas that we need to improve. We need to think strategically. Put yourself in a position, where do you want to go in the next 5 years, in the short term and in the long term? And then identify what are the bottlenecks that are causing the problems you're facing. It is only by then, thinking with an interest of the people at heart, fixing our politics, we will be able to advance our agenda as a single continent and will solve the unemployment crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elavani, for your comments. I want to take final comments from everyone tonight. Professor Iraki, I see you wanted to say something. You can go ahead.
I have a lot of things to say, but I will probably try and summarize. I wish there was a politician in this forum so that he can get the heat from all the commentators. The first way to create jobs in Africa, in my opinion, is very simple. When I listen to KCP results in Kenya, exam results in Kenya, KCP, KCSE results, and you ask those students who get A's, what do you want to do? They say they want to be neurosurgeons, they want to be engineers, they want to be lawyers. Yet those are the people who will be entrepreneurs. Creating a job, creating a farm, creating an enterprise is not for the people who have failed. It's not for people who get D's and get E's. Yet in Africa, we believe that entrepreneurship, job creation is for failures. And we just need to look at some of the countries that we admire. The US, for example. Zuckerberg was in Harvard. If you look at Sergey Brin, who came up with Google, he was in a very tough university called Stanford. So one way to create jobs is to make sure that the brightest people in Africa become job creators. They don't become employees. And I don't know why we don't see that simple fact. Number two, people are saying that we need the right policies. But we just talk. We don't participate in changing those policies. If you are Kenyan, you realize there is something called public participation that is enshrined in the Constitution. But we go for it. We just keep complaining. Let's influence the policies to favor job creation. Number three, I don't understand why we are complaining about colonialism after 59 years. US was colonized, Korea was colonized, China was colonized. They don't blame colonialists, they take up responsibility. We also must take up responsibility. If you don't vote wisely, offer yourself as a leader so that you can be a leader. We cannot keep on complaining about leaders when we can be leaders ourselves. Number four, I'm about to finish. Some of you are complaining that the government is taxing digital economy. You are the same people complaining we are borrowing money. So what do you want the government to do? You don't want the government to borrow money. You don't want the government to tax you. So how do we get money to run our services? And finally, I don't believe that the youth the youth unemployment is a time bomb. The youth are assets. They are a market, and they are very creative. They are very innovative. We should not just see youth as important when there's war. We should see them as an asset that we can exploit to create jobs, to not just to create jobs, but to create new enterprises and make Africa a better home. Finally, I don't understand some things despite being an economist. When you go telling people to come to Africa to invest, why do we find it funny that we are telling people to come and make money? Why can't we make that money ourselves? If you are telling investors from US, from Japan, from everywhere to come to Africa to invest, is that not an indication there's money in this continent? Why can't we make that money ourselves? Why do we think we cannot make money that other people can make money? I'm about to wish you a good night.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Iraqi.
I just wanted to add something,
Go ahead,
Iraqi,
Maria.
yeah, I just wanted to add to what he said. Actually, one of the biggest and most important step would be the inter-Africa, the continental agreement, which basically would allow Africans to invest on the continent in Africa. So I completely wanted to applaud it. And I like the fact that he has thrown out challenges to us to think in a different way. Thank you very much. And just go on, Leah. I just really wanted to applaud him for doing that. Good disruption.
Thank you, thank you. I want to give Dr. Lucy a chance to say something. And Dr. Lucy, one thing I just want to hear from you as we come to a close is solutions. What solutions do you think we should look into as far as issues of unemployment or employment in Africa is concerned?
Okay, thank you very much, Leah. I mean, I'm speaking now from the academic perspective because I'm a teacher, and one of the things that have come up over and over again is the way we prepare the youth for the workforce, the way we prepare the youth for the employment, and even for them to be entrepreneurs and so forth. So, coming from a solution-based perspective, I'll give an example of how I do. How I teach, for example. So what I have taught my students and what I continuously do when I'm going to other universities is that the youth, the university students and the youth should start looking at the base of the pyramid for their source of future income. What we have seen in the past is that the education system in Kenya has continuously prepared students to work for the elitist kind of industry. That's why Professor Iraqi was talking about they want to be neurosurgeons, they want to be engineers, and so forth. But we do not prepare the students to work for Akina Mama Mboga. We do not prepare them to give services to the people in the informal sector. We want them to think of KPMG and PwC. So what I do is that when I am teaching, like now there is a unit I teach called risk theory, I would tell my students to identify the mama mbogas around the university. And they engage her, they have conversations weekly. And as we continue into the semester, they grow her business with her. They come up with business strategies for her. They look at her sources of risks, what can be measured, what cannot. And we continue, and they are able to bring very abstract concepts in actual science. They're able to break them down so that the mama mboga can be able to understand when you talk about if it is claim modeling, for example, they are able to look at how to model her expenses, how to anticipate unexpected risks. Like now, for example, if we have COVID or if we have a strike by the matatus, how should the lady be prepared for that eventuality? When you talk about reserving, that is very technical and actual. But now for her is how much money do you put for a rainy day? And they will use these mathematics and actual concepts to be able to work with the people around Strathmore or around the university where I work in. And what you'll be surprised at the kind of impact such teaching has had, especially in the last 2 years. Because at the end of the semester, I like to get the report. And one of the things I look forward is the letter or the report from the Mama Mboga herself. And I have seen that this will surprise you. Like one of the exit question we always ask is, okay, you've worked with our students or you've worked with my students for 4 months. Would you like to retain their services? And more than 90% say yes. And then the second question is, would you be willing to pay? And around 70% say yes. And the other question is, how much would you be willing to pay? And this is where I get very excited because you'd expect that a Mama Mboga selling tomatoes would be willing probably to pay around 50 shillings or less per day. But what I have seen is that in the last semester that I taught this unit, the minimum person indicated 2,000, when the maximum amount indicated in the forms was around 7,000. So I was curious. I went to look at the report because they write weekly reports, and then now they create a term paper. And I looked at the lady who had said she was willing to pay 7,000, and I saw that the students had approached her when she was simply selling tomatoes for 20 shillings, 30 shillings, waiting for students and the people around the university to buy
tomatoes for 30 bob or 20. But now by the time the semester was done, they had already created online presence for her. They had created Facebook page. They had created a free website, like through Wixpix. They had created a free website. They would upload her wares. They started they created an online channel where they could deliver, and they reached out to us lecturers and said, we have a client who we are consulting, we are doing free consulting, and would you be willing to give her business? Like, can she be supplying your grocery? And this groceries would be brought to Strathmore. Like for me, it was every Monday. And before long, this lady was delivering groceries all over, and before long, the lady who was making a profit of around 6,000, 7,000, like now, for instance, for me, there's a time she brought to my flat where I stay, and before long, 6 of my neighbors were ordering the same from her. And I order 1,000 shillings per week, so that's around 6,000 per week from my flat only. And her business had grown to huge huge extent, to a level where she was asking, can we give her 2 BCom students from Strath who can be managing the chain supply, like logistics and so forth. She had a network of border riders to do the deliveries, and now she had 2 Mkokoteni guys getting things from Marikiti or Wakulima Market to Nairobi West and so forth. So, and with that, I have increasingly seen that when we teach the students to we guide them. We say, this is what I'm teaching, yes. Because like now, for example, using my area, when we look at actual science and mathematics, you'd think that these are courses where we are preparing these guys to work for central banks, to work for securities exchanges, to work for audit firms and so forth. But I have been able, and not just myself, even some of my colleagues, to retrain those minds and say, no, you don't have to look at PwC as a future employer. Why not offer consultancy, whether it is risk advisory, communication, and so forth? Why not offer these services to the mamambogas? And if you're willing to work for free, for example, for 2 or 3 or 4 months, let them see your value, create value for them. Then this will be a source of income for you. And that's where now when you start thinking like that as academics, yeah, every time professor is going to class to teach economics, every time someone else is going to teach engineering, mathematics, another person is going to teach accounting, how can we remodel these students' minds to say, no, why don't you look at the base of the pyramid? Because that's where the big numbers of the country belong to. What services can you offer them? And we capitalize on the economy of scales. So for me, that is a solution. That is one way I would say that is a path to a solution which I would consider as an academic. And if all the universities and colleges start saying, what services can we offer to the people at the base of the pyramid, which makes more than 60% of Kenyans, then clearly there will be some things for our youth to do. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lucy. Mbuku, I can see you're back on. We're just taking final remarks about today's conversation. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much, and I want to appreciate all the speakers and all the contributions that have been made today. My final comments would be, as much as there's so many other underlying issues on youth employment, I think we must be able to accept that we must invest in emerging economies. And if you hear about young people today, they no longer want to go to the traditional jobs, and you'll find that others will, parents would want to take their kids to engineering, but the kids want to do music or robotics. So I think as a country, we must be able to live with the current realities and invest in the orange and digital economy. Secondly, is that we must be able to change our mindsets and accept and invest in manufacturing, and buy Kenya, build Kenya, or buy Africa through the Africa AFCTA. Just seeing how we can be able to, build our own economies as African countries. But then also just saying that we must also see how do we ensure that we build our economies in the sense of tax incentives. Over the period, we have had very harmful tax practices, and especially in the African countries, just facilitating multinational corporations to have an added advantage of our local businesses or our local enterprises. So just thinking, how do we ensure that we are able to balance out and facilitate economies or enterprises within Africa, but also just appreciating that, you know, in the current generation, there's a lot of migration as well of young people. Just seeing how do we tap into that migration, tap into that skill sharing and skills, cross breeding of skills, and you know, just ensuring that, you know, we don't kill our economies, but also just ensuring that some of those cross breedings are sort of complementary and that will build to the Africa continental free trade area. So I think that will be my final comments, and thanks and have a good night.
Thank you, Mbuku. Professor Irake, so you have your hand up. You can go ahead.
Yeah, you know, we can discuss this topic until tomorrow, but I think one of the other things I want to mention very briefly is one way to create jobs in this country is to keep away from textbooks. I like the way the previous student, or the previous professor, I don't know why we call professors and lecturers in Kenya Dr. Ruse or Dr. Jones. It's actually grammatically very incorrect. She explained how she has moved away from textbooks into reality. And I think that's the way to go. For example,
okay,
everybody in this country talks about informal sector as if it doesn't exist. In fact, I was doing some maths and realizing that in Kenya, only 1.6% of Kenyans work for the government. So the rest of the Kenyans work in the informal sector. And if we try to solve the problems of the informal sector, we would create a lot of jobs, not running away from those problems. So as far as job creation is concerned, we need to be as realistic as possible instead of being outlandish or thinking about up there. So let's face the reality, we shall create jobs.
Thank you, Professor Iraki. I just want to hear from Alphonse as well. Alphonse, I can see you're still there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think what I got here is the issue of solution, because discussing the problem alone is not enough. Now, number one is that the solution to unemployment is employment. And in this case, we're talking of creating opportunities. So I want to broadly say there are two areas that we create opportunities. If you want to earn an income, either you solve a problem that, because people have a lot of pain. So in any field, in any area, people are struggling, they are undergoing pain. So using your knowledge, your skill set, and the environment you are in, you need to rethink, how can I solve this pain? How can I minimize or reduce it or even eliminate the pain? That way you'll be paid for that pain alleviation. Number two, you can also create a good experience. For example, if you are running a tour company just to make people who have been working so hard to just go and relax, you may not necessarily be alleviating pain, but you are creating a good environment to just people to feel relaxed again, people to have a new environment of feeling revamped, renewed, and such. So what is it that you can do to make people feel way better than they are today, or to make them have the pain they're suffering from alleviated or minimized? So when we rethink broadly in those two lines, we are able to solve a lot of problems. For example, when I went to university, my first degree, I went to the Faculty of Agriculture, and as one of the speakers said, we don't value farming as young people. But then I discovered that actually I can just go and solve storage problems, so that people during harvest, they sell a lot of produce at a very low price. Then a few months later, they start looking for the same produce now at a very high price. So by coming up with a solution on storage, you discover that first I was able to gain a pay, but also around them, they were able to gain value on the same. So there's always something you can do about solutions. So I think, to me, can we discuss solution going forward, maybe in the next session and such sessions, so that we're able to come up with things that we can run away with? For example, what Dr. Lucy has shared, I think it was very encouraging, and I won't mind being in her class. Thank you.
Thank you, Alphonse. You know, interestingly, even as you talk about solutions and everyone is giving, and I love what Dr. Lucy spoke about as well. And it's true, we actually may need to have another conversation now. Having establish that there's an employment issue, then what are the solutions? And I think here we talk about empowerment. How can we guide and mentor the young people? Charles, I want to hear from you briefly. We've run completely out of time, and I just want to hear from everyone briefly. Charles, you can go ahead. Charles, are you there? Charles, if you can just tap on your microphone. I don't know if you have muted yourself. All right. It seems like Charles is not with us. But again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been a part of this conversation. Maria, I don't know if you have anything to say before we come to a close.
Leah, I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope everybody did. And I like the fact that we have not remained on only one track, but every speaker has been able to contribute and to give a different dimension and a different perspective to the given growing unemployment. And I even like the fact that it was turned around and say, although they may not appear to be so-called employed, but it's not necessarily that they're unemployed because they are generating income. So these are really wonderful insights, and I completely agree with all of you. We need another session for solutions. Thank you so much.
I agree as well. And we will definitely, as Mwanzo TV, try and set up another Twitter space where we can actually talk about solutions, talk about empowerment, what organizations are on the ground that are helping the youth, and how can the youth be able to get in touch with them. Thank you so much to everyone who has been part of this discussion. Again, remember, this is a program that takes place every Wednesday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. here on Mwanzo TV. Remember this conversation. In case there's something you missed out on and you want to hear it again, you can go on to our YouTube channel, Mwanzo TV. You will find all the content there from tonight's discussion, previous discussions. And again, we are an organization, or a media house rather, that covers Africa, and issues like this matter to us as a media company. So head on over to Mwanzo TV, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and see what other content is there that's also very helpful to all our viewers. Again, thank you so much for being part of this discussion, to all the speakers, to all the listeners who have also taken part, and even to the ones who have been quiet. Thank you, and see you next week on Wednesday, 7 p.m., same time, for another topic. Good night. My name is Leangari.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.